before you actually start. That's one thing I've noticed. Just jump right into it, which, okay. So smiles, and then go. Yeah, that involves you too. Both smiles, both look at the camera. There you go.
So we have noticed something that has become a lost art, and that is the art of being a good conversationalist. I don't know if it's just because of technology, texting, social media, probably all of that contributes, but also maybe self-centeredness and different things that have caused a lot of people in society right now to not know how to have a good conversation. In fact, even maybe feel a little bit phobic or have anxiety about having a conversation because they don't feel good at it. And so we are going to talk today about how to be a good conversationalist. Okay, so why do you think it's important to be a good conversationalist? In other words, why do people care? What does it matter if they are horrible conversationalists? What's the benefit of developing skills in this area?
I think there are many, actually. Part of what I feel is my mission in life is to bless the people that God puts in my path. Mm-hmm. And one way to do that is by allowing people to talk, drawing them out, letting them have the opportunity to express themselves. Mm-hmm. They don't get a lot of opportunities to do that because most people they encounter are competing with them, mm-hmm. wanting to tell them their story, and mm-hmm. they don't get a chance to tell theirs. But there are other benefits. When you look at any organization, from like even a business standpoint or any organization, the people who rise to the top are the people who make other people comfortable. Mm-hmm. That's not always the most qualified person, the most intelligent person, or the person with the best education. It's the person who gets along well with other people, and frequently that comes down to how well do you communicate with other people, mm-hmm. allow other people to communicate, mm-hmm. How unselfish are you with conversation? Mm-hmm. Just letting people talk makes them enjoy the time they had with you. Mm-hmm. They may not get a handle on exactly why they enjoyed your company or being with you, yeah. and I don't care. Mm-hmm. I'm okay with that, as long as they leave feeling, wow, that was really nice. Mm-hmm. And they frequently do if they get to do most of the talking.
Yeah. So what have you learned about how to be a good conversationalist?
To think in terms of the other person's interests. When I enter a conversation, I'm not there to let them know everything I know. I'm hopefully going to learn everything they know. Mm. People love to talk about themselves. Drop a question and they will run with it. Drop another question and they'll run with it. And we've done little things to prompt ourselves. We use the four. Family is the first thing. If you can't think of something to say, ask people about their family. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got one. Mm-hmm. O in 4 is occupation. Ask them, what do you do? And people have a lot to say about what they do. And then the last is R, recreation. So, what do you like to do? Who do you like to do it with? They're so excited to be able to talk and to tell you everything they know about whatever you've asked them about. Mm-hmm. I think it just doesn't cross their minds. Mm-hmm. Hey, maybe I should ask them a question.
Yeah. Really, being a good conversationalist consists of asking other people questions about themselves and not just focusing on yourself or talking about yourself. My husband and I actually just had I don't know if you can call it a conversation when you don't talk at all. I don't know. A listen? We just had a listen session. There was a man who talked incessantly. I mean, we did not talk at all. We listened to him talk incessantly. And it was, it's always a little disappointing to me when somebody doesn't, it just feels like they don't care. If sure. You don't ask, if no one is asking you questions about yourself, it feels like, look, I don't care about you. I think that's what it communicates. Mm-hmm. Even though that's not necessarily true, I feel like that is what is communicated yes. through that. And so we listened to him talk, and then he left. So that was the end of it. And he called us to tell us what a delightful conversation that was. And how great we were.
I rest my case.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it was. We listened to the message and thought, what conversation? It wasn't a conversation. It was us listening to you. You know nothing about us. You're in the message. He said how great we were. He doesn't even know that if we're great because he knows nothing about us. He just knows that we listened to him the entire time, and it clearly made him feel cared about. Mm-hmm. So we had to fight the temptation to feel not cared about because he didn't ask us anything. But on the flip side of that is that when you listen well, in other words, you're really listening. You're not contemplating what you're going to say next or thinking about yourself. You're really listening to someone speak. Mm-hmm. I think you have the power and opportunity to communicate to somebody, I see you, mm-hmm. I hear you, you matter, you're important, you have value, and you're worth listening to. Mm-hmm. And that's what we got to do with this man. We got to totally bless him.
Yeah.
By doing one thing, listening.
Being quiet.
Listening. Mm-hmm. And not jumping in when we had a chance to tell him about us. We just let him talk.
Amazing how that works.
It's amazing.
Many years ago, we listened to a presentation by Dennis Waitley. A lot of our thoughts on this subject are plagiarized from him. And he said, you know, if you're in a conversation and you're asking questions, when you leave, you'll know everything that you knew before. And now you also know everything they know. If you do all the talking, when you leave, you'll know everything you knew before and nothing mm-hmm. else. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, so we already talked about people who talk too much, which I think is probably the majority of people, but then there's also the person who doesn't talk at all. So you get together, you're in a situation where there would be conversation, and they don't talk at all.
I think it may be more challenging than the person who talks too much. Mm-hmm. Drawing them out, it maybe is more challenging, but maybe more important. Because a lot of people are not willing to fight through the dead air space to draw them out, to get them to talk. Mm-hmm. They may need to talk more than anyone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Being a safe place, what we call a safe place. In other words, never criticizing or being condescending in any way towards anything that they say, letting them know that whatever they say is safe with you. You're not going to judge them by what they say or correct them or disagree.
Maybe even telling them about some of your own hurts. You know, people tend to feel pretty closed off when they have a lot of hurts, and often it's because they think they're the only one that has those hurts, or, you know, people just tend to not talk about the shameful stuff in their life or the hurtful things in their life. And sometimes when you open up about your own hurts, it can make the other person feel like they're not alone, like maybe you would understand them, make them feel a little less insecure about their issues. And so being honest and vulnerable yourself is a way to draw out people who are closed off.
We have a saying in business, the pace of the leader is the pace of the pack. And in this conversation, you're the leader. And if you're willing to have some of that vulnerability or expose maybe a flaw in your life or a weakness that you have, that gives them a comfortable place to be able to reciprocate. And frequently they won't do it until they see you be vulnerable first.
Something that I used to struggle with was a little bit of social phobia. So when I would go into social situations, I would get a little nervous. I felt the pressure of carrying a conversation. I also just would get nervous about what we're going to talk about. And so something that helped me is before I was going to go into a social situation, I would very deliberately consider what I could talk to them about, questions that I could ask them. And, you know, what I ended up finding out is that I didn't need to worry about what I was going to talk about. All I needed to do was think of a few questions I could ask them, and the conversation would take care of itself. Because people are happy, usually, not always, usually are really happy to just talk, answer your questions. Nonetheless, it does take away some of the anxiety if that is something you struggle with, like what are we going to talk about? You know, another thing that I notice with conversation these days is cell phones. People, when you're, I'm talking like in the middle of conversation, and they are pulling out their phone and getting on their phone.
Yes. Horrible.
It's
Yes.
horrible. Yeah,
Yeah.
it drives me crazy. It really does. And I certainly understand, and probably we all understand, that there are occasional times when maybe your children are staying alone and you need to have your phone available for them to get a hold of you or whatever. That would take.
Some situations.
Yeah, there's some
Rare.
things that would take precedence over a conversation you're currently having. But good grief, that is not what's happening. Most people are. It's not because there's something urgent. They are getting on their phone. What is that? What do you think that is? Do you have any thoughts on why somebody would, while in conversation, get out their phone and get on it?
I think that again comes back to someone not having pre-considered and made a decision about how we want to handle this. That what we call electronic leash is pretty powerful. It's I always have a hard time ignoring the phone ringing or something like that. So it would be a natural tendency of mine if my phone rings, to grab it, even if we're talking or whatever, at least look at it. You don't have to do that. You can put it on silent. You can lay it down. You can leave it in the car. That's a hard one, and it's getting worse, I'm afraid.
I think there's an addiction to technology, and that's part of it. They're literally addicted to their phone and can't even place a higher priority on someone they're talking to than their addiction. I think it is something that has to be kind of predetermined. If you're just not thinking about it, and maybe some of us have never even thought about that, never even thought about what does it communicate to somebody when I'm talking to them and I stop and get my phone out and start doing stuff on my phone. I know when I'm on the receiving end of that, I tend to think either I'm boring the person, that I've lost their interest, they're disinterested in what we're talking about, or disinterested in me personally, or whatever. I know it communicates to me a feeling of a lack of worth. This is more important to me, and maybe that is the reality, and maybe not. Maybe that's not at all what it is, but that's what can feel communicated, intentionally or not, or if whether that's a perception or reality, I don't know. But just stay off your phone. If you're with someone and being a good conversationalist is important to you, stay off your phone.
Sure. There's certain rules of etiquette that we have learned and adopted and been taught over the years on other subjects. This is one that is kind of an emerging lack of etiquette or lack of awareness that maybe there's a need for a class about that.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of like a new problem that maybe isn't talked about that much. But also consider that maybe you have an addiction if you feel like you can't stay off of your phone.
Sure.
Yeah, if you're having a conversation with someone and you cannot resist getting your phone out, maybe that's an issue. Something to consider. So anyway. I think that considering ahead of time what you're going to do will be a big part of being a good conversationalist. Going into a time with somebody else and predetermining that you plan to be a good listener, to ask them questions, maybe think of what those questions will be ahead of time so you feel some of the pressure relieved because you already know what you could ask. And then as they talk, really consider how wonderful it is that you have an opportunity to make them feel valued, seen, cared for. And I think that it can almost feel exciting when just by listening, I can totally bless this person.
Yes.
And I think it's more powerful than people realize. That's maybe why more people are not, intentionally trying to be a better conversationalist. But I hope that helps you. I hope that that you'll put some of these things into practice and watch how people will be drawn to you when you are a good listener. So God bless you and know that you are loved.
Yes.